You set an alarm last night. You dragged yourself out of bed this morning. You are somewhere right now. A desk, a commute, a couch, following a schedule that someone else mostly invented. And if you stop for a second and ask yourself honestly whether this is what humans were built for, the honest answer might surprise you. Because for 300,000 years, your ancestors woke up to a completely different world. And what they actually did with their days is nothing like what you've been told. Most people imagine early humans as desperate, terrified creatures, scrambling for food, hiding from predators, barely surviving. That image has been repeated so many times it feels like fact, but it isn't. In the 1960s, anthropologist Marshall Salins looked at the actual time-use patterns of hunter-gatherer societies still living in traditional ways, and what he found shook the entire field of economics. He called them the original affluent society, not because they had wealth, but because they had something modern humans seem to have completely lost: time. The Jew/Hoansi people of the Kalahari, studied in extraordinary detail by anthropologist Richard Lee throughout the 1960s, worked on average about 15 to 17 hours a week to meet all of their food needs, not per day, per week. The rest of their time was not spent in survival panic. It was spent resting, socializing, playing, making things, telling stories, and doing absolutely nothing in particular. Sit with that for a moment. 15 to 17 hours a week. You probably spend more time than that just commuting. So what was actually happening during the other 50-odd hours of your ancestors' week? That's the question worth asking. And the answer isn't what productivity culture would ever want you to hear. The most common daytime activity in traditional hunter-gatherer groups was conversation, not structured, purposeful, agenda-driven conversation, just talking. Anthropologists who embedded with groups in the Amazon, in Central Africa, and Australia consistently reported the same thing. People sat together and talked for hours about nothing urgent, about animals they'd seen, about dreams they'd had, about people who were behaving strangely, about things that were funny. Laughter was, by all accounts, constant. These were not grim, stoic survivors. They were social creatures doing what social creatures do. This wasn't laziness. It was biology working exactly as designed. Your brain is a social organ. It was shaped over millions of years to process faces, track relationships, read intentions, and maintain bonds within a group. Neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman, in his research at UCLA, found that the brain's default mode network, the system that activates the moment you stop doing a focused task, is essentially a social processing engine. When you let your mind wander, it immediately starts thinking about people, about relationships, about what someone meant when they said that thing. Your brain returns to social thinking the way water returns to a level surface. Because for nearly all of human history, social connection was the single most important survival variable there was. Alone, your ancestor died. Together, they thrived. Food gathering, when it happened, was often done in the late morning and completed well before midday. Women in many hunter-gatherer societies provided the majority of caloric intake through plant gathering, a task that was skilled, intentional, and encyclopedic in its knowledge of local ecology. This wasn't wandering around hoping to find something edible. This was deep expertise. A forager might know hundreds of plant species, their seasonal cycles, their preparation requirements, their medicinal properties. The knowledge held in a single experienced forager's mind would fill volumes. Hunting happened less frequently than most people imagine. Large game hunts were events, sometimes days apart, and when they were successful, the whole group ate together. The meat was shared according to social rules. Not hoarded, not traded, shared. Evolutionary anthropologist Kim Sterelny has argued that this pattern of obligate sharing was one of the key evolutionary pressures that shaped human sociality. You couldn't keep the antelope to yourself, even if you wanted to. The group expected a portion, and in a world where tomorrow's hunt might fail, that expectation kept everyone alive. The afternoons in most documented groups were slow. Children played. And this is worth pausing on, because the play of hunter-gatherer children looked almost nothing like modern structured childhood. There was no curriculum, no schedule. Children of different ages mixed freely and played together for hours, inventing games, exploring, practicing skills through imitation, negotiating conflicts, and doing so almost entirely without adult supervision. Peter Gray, a developmental psychologist at Boston College who has studied this extensively, argues that this style of free, mixed-age play is the environment human children's brains were literally designed to develop inside. The absence of it in modern life, he suggests, may be directly connected to rising rates of anxiety and depression in young people. Adults rested, napped, groomed each other, not just for hygiene, but for the neurochemical reward it produced. Primatologist Robin Dunbar has shown that social grooming in primates triggers endorphin release in the brain. Human equivalents, gentle touch, close physical proximity, laughter, do the same thing. The afternoon rest period in hunter-gatherer groups wasn't a cultural quirk. It was biochemical maintenance. As the sun dropped, the real ritual began. Fire. The controlled use of fire by early humans dates back at least 400,000 years, and possibly much longer. But fire wasn't just warmth and cooked food. Anthropologist Polly Wiesner spent decades studying the hoansi, and she made a specific, methodical comparison between daytime conversation and nighttime conversation around the fire. Daytime talk was practical, about food, resources, complaints, social tensions. Nighttime talk around the fire was almost entirely stories, and not just any stories. Stories about people not present, stories about the past, stories about supernatural beings, about the origin of the world, about what happens after death. Wiesner called this the origin of hexaro, a form of social bonding that reached across vast distances through shared narrative. Storytelling was the technology that allowed a small group to feel connected to people they hadn't seen in months. It was how knowledge was preserved without writing. It was how identity was transmitted across generations. It was, in a very real sense, the original internet, a system for moving information and emotion between minds in the dark around a warm light. You do the same thing, right now. You scroll, you share, you watch something and send it to someone because it made you feel something and you want them to feel it too. The medium has changed. The impulse is exactly 400,000 years old. This is where it gets strange. By almost every measure of the things that actually seem to matter to human well-being, sleep, movement, social connection, play, rest, time in nature, control over one's own schedule, hunter-gatherer life scored significantly higher than the modern average. That doesn't mean it was easy or without suffering. Child mortality was high. Violence between groups existed. Life was unpredictable in ways that would be terrifying to modern sensibilities. These things were real and serious. But the daily texture of a hunter-gatherer's existence, the hours, the pace, the social richness, the time spent doing nothing purposeful at all, looks, from the outside, like something a lot of people today are desperately trying to buy back. With vacations, with meditation apps, with do-nothing weekends that still somehow end up full of things. Here is the uncomfortable question underneath all of this. If your ancestors were not, in fact, spending their days in frantic survival terror, if they were mostly talking, resting, playing, and telling stories around a fire, then what exactly is the modern schedule optimizing for? And who decided it was better? The agricultural revolution, roughly 10,000 years ago, changed everything, permanently. Farming produced more food. More food meant more people. More people meant cities, specialization, surplus, trade, armies, empires, writing, science, technology. The whole chain that eventually produces the device you're using right now. No rational person would undo that chain, but farming also produced something else. It produced the concept of working harder than you need to. A farmer with more land produces more crops, which means more surplus, which means more security. So you work more. Then your neighbor does the same. Then the logic locks in, and 10,000 years later, you're setting an alarm to go and sit in a building for 8 hours. Because that is simply what people do. And somewhere deep in your body, a very old system is registering a quiet complaint. Your circadian rhythm, shaped over millions of years to follow the sun, gets overridden by artificial light and calendar apps. Your stress response, designed for acute, short-term physical threats, runs chronically in response to abstract social pressure. Your social brain, built to maintain about 150 close relationships in a stable community, tries to process 1,000 digital contacts and mostly fails. Your nervous system is running on ancient hardware inside a world that upgraded the software without asking. This is not nostalgia for a past that wasn't really better. The past had real horrors. This is something more specific. It's the recognition that the mismatch between the body you inherited and the environment you inhabit is not a personal failure. It is a structural condition. And understanding where your body came from is the first step to understanding why it behaves the way it does today. Why you crave rest but feel guilty about it. Why conversation with a friend can repair something that no task completion ever quite touches. Why sitting around a fire, or its modern equivalent, a dim room with people you love and no particular agenda, feels like exhaling for the first time all day. You set an alarm last night. You dragged yourself out of bed this morning, and for the first time, you might understand exactly why that felt so wrong.